In this lecture, we are going to see an overview of bill of materials, one of the most important master data in production planning. First of all, we are going to see the goals of this session. In this section, we are going to introduce the bill of materials, for what is used in SAP and in production planning and where we can find the different fields. On the other hand, we are going to see at what organizational level is defined and what master data has to be in place before creating them. BOMs overview. Bill of materials are created for manufactured materials, either finished or semi-finished goods, and they mainly specify the different components that constitute them and in what quantity. This information will be useful for exploding requirements downwards, for proposing components to consume in production order, or for instance, to calculate the cost of the good to manufacture. Sometimes the same manufactured material can be done with different components, so it is possible to create alternative BOMs. Depending on the usage that we want to give to a BOM, we might limit its use to different functionalities entering a different BOM usage, only for costing, for design, for sales, or for production, the use we are going to see in this course. The BOMs are structured in header, items, and sub-items. In the header, we specify the material to produce and general data that affects the whole BOM, alternative, usage, tests. In each item, we specify the required components and their quantities, and some specific information of how we want to process each of them, if it is going to be relevant for costing, if it must have special treatment during MRP, etc. Finally, inside each item, we can define different installation points or sub-items indicating where these components are going to be placed. We can see in this slide this different information. One of the most important fields is the item category. You can define it if it is a stock item, non-stock item, document, text item. This will affect the functionality in subsequent processes. For instance, when creating a production order with a BOM where the components are stock items, automatically reservations will be created for consuming these components quantities from stock, reservations that will be counted up by MRP for calculating net requirements. When we have BOMs of different levels, we just have to create different BOMs for the different semi-finished and one for the finished product. In this way, we can build structures as complex as we want. Later on, it will be possible to run reports to see them at the same place, but in the BOM transaction they will be maintained each level at a time. Organizational structure. Each BOM can be defined for only one plant or for all where the materials are defined. It would be possible then to use different ones depending on the plant. Usage, as already stated, can be useful for limit the processes in which each BOM is going to be used. For the same material, we can have a BOM for manufacturing, a BOM for costing, and a BOM for design department. Involved master data. Before the creation of a BOM, all of the materials to be used in it must have been created in advance. There is not other master data involved in BOMs. Main screens and fields. In the header screen, we can see the material to manufacture, the plant for which the BOM has been created, the alternative, and the usage. The bill of material code is assigned internally. You can also see in the Quants Long Test tab the text to define at header level. They affect the whole BOM. The base quantity, that is the quantity for which the components quantities are entered. For instance, if it is 1, the component quantities will be the needed quantities to manufacture 1 unit of the header material. It is possible to limit the use of the BOM with the status field. When inactive, an error message will be raised if you try to use it, or it won't appear in the set functions. In the Item Basic Data tab, we can see the item number, that it is proposed by default when creating the BOM, but it can be changed. It cannot be repeated, so it identifies each line. The item category, already seen in this session. Quantity data, in addition of the required quantity, it can be stated the scrap percentage, which in the MAP calculations will increment the required quantity to cover this loss. General data, where we can define if there is a coproduct, especially in chemical process, it can be an additional output, apart from the manufactured good. Or if the same manufactured product can be a component in its own BOM, for instance in repairs. Finally, in the MAP data, we can define offset for scheduling or different special procurements. For instance, we can define phantom sub-assemblies that will pass directly to their items their own requirements without making a reservation for these phantom materials. In the status loan test tab, we can define tests at item level only to affect each of the items. We can define the status of each of these items if it is relevant for production, engineering, costs, and we can also define other data such as the storage location from which will be consumed. For each of the items, we can define different sub-items or installation locations. Finally, when we enter in a BOM transaction, we will always see the overview in which we can see basic header data in the upper side and the different items in the lower one.